This is Life Coach Myrna, and you're listening to 5 Minutes with Coach Myrna. Today I want to teach on the topic, can you really love your enemy? In the King James Version of the Bible, Jesus said, "But I say unto you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and prosecute you." He further goes on to say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek also. Most humans in the natural cannot live by that doctrine, and neither could I until I transformed my mindset. You see, the reason that Jesus taught us to love our enemies is that the power of love transforms. For the last 9 months, I've been in a battle with my enemy. I have a racist neighbor who is the vice president of my HOA. And for a month, I allowed her to steal my peace. I know that evil intentions against another is a karmic debt, and whatsoever you do unto others will come back to you. I also know that we do not fight flesh and blood. We fight with spiritual principalities. So I was doing my full spiritual warfare prayer. I took this to God, and I told him, and I asked him to fight my battles for me. But this woman still stole my peace because I can't wrap my head around the fact that you hate another person just because of the color of their skin. So I was finding no peace. I was giving her back the same amount of hate that she was giving me until God convicted me. He convicted me by putting a book in front of me. The book was The Seed of the Soul by Zari Zukov. And in that book, Gary talked about the energy of hate. And he talked about light and darkness and how the energy of hate is darkness and the energy of love is with a capital L, right? Means spirituality and God. And he says that when you put hate towards hate, if someone hates you and you hit them right back, then you have become just like them. You're no better than them, and you've, in fact, increased that energy because the energy that was like this now is now like this because you've added your hate to this rolling ball. He said, instead, send them light, send them love, because what happens when we flip on the light? In a dark room, there's no more darkness. And that's what he said to do. So I started sending her light. I started meditating and sending her my healing light. Because we all have a light and we all have healing energy. And I started sending her light. But I was also convicted when I was watching this movie on Netflix that was called The Best of Enemies. And this was a movie about a white Klansman who was full of hate for Black people, of course, because he actually believed in what he was preaching. And he was preaching that Black people has no rights and that white people were the superior race and Black people did not deserve any of the human elements of life. So the Black activist was played by Taraji P. Henson, and she was an activist for fair housing, right, for the Black people, because the white landlords were evicting people, they weren't fixing anything, and the slumlords, right? So I don't need to paint the picture. So she was fighting for that, and in the middle of this fight for fair housing, someone burnt down the Black school. So now the kids had no place to go to school, so they started the integration conversation. And of course, the white Klansmen and all the white people in the town were against it because they didn't want their little white children sitting beside Black children in the school. So there was this friction and there was this fight, and they called in someone to mediate, and they had this kind of council meeting, and everybody, talked about, their side, and he was mediating. So the Black Klansmen, and I mean the White Klansmen, I don't want to say that, the White Klansmen and the Black activists started to integrate and started to talk. And somehow feelings started to get changed. And the White Klansman had a son that lived in a mental institution. He was mentally ill, and he lived in a mental institution. And you would see them going, and both the mother and the father would go in every day and visit this boy, and have breakfast with him and talk to him, whatever. But then he became unhinged when they put a Black boy in his room. He'd never seen Black people before, and he thought the boy was a monster. So he yelled and screamed all day, "Get the monster out of here," whatever. And the White Klansmen will go to the owner of, or the people that was running this institution, and say, "I need you to remove that boy out of my son's room." And they would say, "Hey, if you want to have him removed, then you have to pay for a private room." And he was poor. He couldn't afford the $75 extra a week for a private room. So his son was in turmoil, holding his head, screaming all day long. And then the Black activists, who didn't have no hate for white people, she just wanted what's right, to take pity on the family and took pity on the boy and used her influence to have the institution put the boy in a private room. So the parents didn't have to pay any extra money because they didn't have it. That single act of kindness was the light that came into that darkness. And right away, they started thanking her and started not understanding why they would do this for her, why she would do this for them when they were only giving her hate. And then they were trying to get all the white people in the town to vote against this integration. And he went to his friend that owned a store and wanted him to vote against this integration. They were, like grassrooting, like you do in politics. And he says, "Why do you have that Black man a manager of your store? You trust him?" And the guy said to him, "Yes, I do. Other than my wife, he's the only person I trust because we served in Vietnam together and he saved my life." That was the straw that broke the camel's back, as my grandmother would say. All of a sudden, the hate that he had in his heart for Black people went poof. Maybe they're good people after all. Maybe that I shouldn't be the Klans person and I shouldn't say that they're inferior and they're full of hate. And that started the whole process. In the end, he was the deciding vote for integration. He tore up his Klansman cart, and they became friends. So, if I were to ask that question again, can you really love your enemies? I would say yes. There's a saying that we have in my country that said, "Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." And I put before you that hate is the same way, right? You hating someone is like drinking poison because that hate goes into your heart, goes into everything that you do and keeps you downtrodden. You can't rise up like a balloon with hate. You can rise up with a balloon with love. So, Joel Osteen taught the other day that when we stamp things negative, we allow them to steal our joy and happiness. I choose to stamp the hate of my neighbor as positive because I know that God will turn whatever she throws my way and he will turn it around for good and it will boomerang back to her. And I don't have to hate her. All I have to do is love her and have pity on her. So you can do the same thing. Remember the words in the Bible. God said, "I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future." Make that part of your psyche. Make that part of your everyday mantra that you say to yourself. And then you can love your enemies because you realize that they don't have the power to hurt you. So I hope that you learned something from this today. And this is Coach Myrna in 5 minutes with Coach Myrna. So tune in next week for the next episode of 5 minutes with Coach Myrna. In the meantime, until then, blessings.